What's your plan if nuclear war breaks out between NATO and Russia? Take car, go to Mum's. Kill Phil? Grab Liz, go to the Winchester? Have a nice cold pint, and wait for all of this to blow over. Edit. After reading the comments, it looks like the Winchester might be a bit packed, so I'll probably just put the bins out while it's still safe to do so. Then again, I don't want to be fined if I'm unable to bring them back in on time. I'll probably spend my last moments trying to phone my local council. Can you imagine the corporate emails? We know that today has been one of historic devastation, and all of us are affected in some way. Friends, CO workers, and family members have been erased from our lives by an army across the planet. We are living through dark times which require decisive action beyond simple thoughts and prayers. We must persevere. This is why we have made the difficult decision to reopen Buck's Stereo World during our normal business hours starting tomorrow. Please report for your regularly scheduled shifts. All absences will be treated as no-call, no-shows. Employees can make use of EAP benefits, and will be provided iodine tablets when they arrive in 12-14 months. In light of the seriousness of this tragedy, casual Fridays are suspended until further notice. Good one. When I was a young lad, after a 7-10-day shift in the woods, our helicopter pilot got changed, and it was this guy I knew from my gym. I had no idea what he did for work, but he said he flew choppers in the military and then retired to do casual stuff on the side. Long story long, I asked if he could show us how aggressively he can drive them and what their limits were. We were going side to side, up and down. Was the coolest ever helicopter ride I ever had. I thought we were going to die a few times, and at the end he says, "Yeah, I didn't want to push the sweet bird around more than we did, but we could have went a bit more extreme." Thanked him a ton. My coworker says to me alone after he dropped us off, "You never ask for that ever again at the end of a shift." Never. Always at the beginning. I never want to die after a long shift, lol. Edit. Thank you for the awards and enjoying a part of my life with me, smile. You joke, but it's actually a viable safety protocol. Most casualties from a nuke wouldn't come from instant vaporization, but from the shock wave that knocks buildings down, blows out windows, and flings heavy objects around. If you're even just a few miles away from the ground zero, your chances of survival are exponentially greater if you take shelter. So yes, hiding under a table could save your life. I was living alone in an apartment, and it was 11 p.m. at night, and I was half awake watching TV. I heard someone banging on my door, and I literally jumped off of my couch with adrenaline shooting way up. It turned out to be the maintenance guy that had to fix a minor leak. He was in and out in about 10 minutes, but it took me like half an hour to calm down enough to relax. Once I had it, when I had just started using Discord, that I accidentally stayed in an empty voice chat of a large Discord server overnight. Suddenly, at 2 a.m., someone sends a but command and my speaker starts blasting, "Pain. You made me a believer. I kept out of bed very quickly, and in my half-asleep state I dove under the desk and yanked out my 3.5mm audio cables. Discord wasn't on the taskbar, so I had a silent panic attack. That aspirated game had given me a virus. So I pulled up Taskbar and saw Discord, opened it, and yup, some boy was blasting music in the voice chat at 2 a.m. Apart from the night where I woke up feeling my arm burst open, this was the most bizarre dead of night experience I've had. I felt my arm burst open. It was the middle of the night. I woke up for some reason or other, and I tried to move my right arm. Suddenly, I heard a loud, sharp sound, like a blunt popping sound, as if a plastic bag had been burst open, followed by a hissing noise, as if a rush of gas was escaping from a torn open hole. At that moment, I noticed a dripping sensation on my forehead and face. At 1 a.m., the only logical conclusion was, "That's blood on my face. I can't feel my arm." A pop, and a hiss. My arm has burst open, and air is leaking out of it. I panicked, and sat up in the dark, trying to move my right arm, but to no avail. I flailed around with my left arm until I grabbed hold of my right bicep, and slowly moved my left hand down my right arm, fully expecting, my half-delirious state, to feel the moist remains of a burst open elbow and forearm. But no, my right arm was present, and whole. Slowly, feeling returned to my right arm, and I began to piece together what had happened. Somehow, my right arm had fallen asleep and the nerves had temporarily shut off. I had swung my arm outward, and it had slammed against the wall. Hence the loud immediate sound similar to a pop. Then, my arm went limp and slid along the wall, making a hissing sound from the friction between the wall and my arm. Finally, the dripping on my face was simply sweat droplets because I was somewhat overheated in my bed that night. That was easily the most bizarre experience I've had at 2 a.m. Well, I suppose the collapsing bookshelf over my bed might have been more bizarre, but the exploding arm was bizarre for a longer time before realization set in. The collapsing bookshelf. I had been married for only a few months at the time, and I was drifting off to sleep after giving me wife a good never mind. Anyway, I was drifting off to sleep, laying my back. It seemed odd at first, but I was looking upwards at our ceiling, the bookshelf behind our bed stuffed full of oversized books. It looked oddly unstable, and the books were laid in horizontal stacks on top of each other rather than in vertical rows like they should have been. My wife stirred in her sleep and the bookshelf wiggled. A very large stack of books on the topmost shelf, consisting of an atlas, thesaurus, dictionary, and overtly religious dogmatic manifesto belonging to my wife's grandmother, teeters on the edge of the bookshelf. As I saw the books tip over the edge, I instinctively leapt up and out of the bed with a yelp as I heard the rumbling of books and the loud crack of a breaking shelf as the debris collapsed onto the bed. My wife sat up in shock and asked, "What's going on?" In a very confused voice. It was at that point that I recalled that we had no bookshelf in our bedroom, and that the entire scenario, including the rigorous activity I'd had with my wife before trying to sleep, had been part of a very visceral dream. That was a pretty bizarre nighttime experience, probably less bizarre than the late-night encounter with my wife's best friend in a ski resort, but that one doesn't quite count since it wasn't in the dead of night. The late-night encounter with my wife's best friend at the ski resort. We were just engaged at the time, and we'd gone to a ski resort with some of my friends and some of her friends. There were a lot of us in a resort suite that had 3 bedrooms as well as a couch. Doing the math, one of us was forced to sleep on the couch in the main room, and that happened to be me. It was pretty dark and everyone had retired for the night. So, like any normal human who never had any bizarre situations in the middle of the night, I fully expected to simply close my eyes and wake up a moment later to find that it was morning. But my brain was having none of it, and I recall having a horrid dream about some kind of slug person trying to get into the room through the vents, like the xenomorph but much slower and slimier. I was startled awake when I felt a hand grab my shoulder, and in my slug-fueled state, I leapt off the couch with a gasp. A smaller female form jumped away from me, stumbling backward against the corner of the coffee table and staggering sideways from the impact. Both of us paused for a millisecond as we tried to process the situation. No one else woke up, so I asked my fiancé's friend just what the heck she thought she was doing. She was very embarrassed and said that I had been calling her name as she had left her room to get some water to drink, and that when she came over to ask me what was up, I didn't respond, and so she tried to shake me awake. Considering I had dreamed of a slug man, I find this explanation dubious, but I have no other, and thus am forced to make do with the information I had on hand. That was probably my most bizarre nighttime encounter that involved another person. It wasn't as off-putting as the raw meat incident, but it was pretty embarrassing to say the least. What's funnier is my wife came running, and when I explained what happened she was like, "Seriously? You're a grown man," and went about soothing the baby, who at this point didn't want to have anything to do with the scary furry-faced person who just yelled. I went into the kitchen, and about 2 minutes later I hear a howl, the cry of a baby. She comes barreling out of the bedroom and says, "Holy shit, get rid of that damn toy." Turns out it was some toy that had a button on its chest, and it was in a bin of toys, just hair trigger ready to go. Walking into the room was enough to set off that tickle me landmine. I was a kid in the 90s. One year for Christmas, my sister, age 7-ish at the time, got this remote-controlled doll. It was a baby in a walker that would move and laugh whenever you drove it forward. Well, sometimes it moved by itself, and it laughed. It had a generic high-pitched baby laugh, something that was a little annoying when you expected it, but was very creepy, randomly laughing in another room. This thing came alive at random times. It would move constantly for a bit, then be still for hours or days before you hear a baby laugh coming from a closet. It didn't move without batteries, or this story would be much different. We figured that the radio frequency for the remote control was the same as a nearby radio station or something, so it would pick up random signals. The doll went to a farm pretty quickly. Edit: I think this is the doll. https://2.b/b8a3j85c. I had two Furbies. They could detect motion and that would trigger them to speak. Mine talked the most at night. Baby Furby would say he was scared or cold, and adult Furby just kind of rambled on, as they do. Had to start keeping them in the closet. They still spoke at night while in there. I could hear the muffled whine of baby Furby being scared through my closet, and I'd just sit there absolutely terrified. 90s toys were a nightmare. I still remember the day my mother and 7-year-old me both agreed to throw my Furby in the trash. It just started randomly making sounds while sitting on the dresser in the far corner of my bedroom. My mom happened to walk in my room and witness it. I had a super active imagination that caused a lot of nightmares, and I was glad to finally have confirmation from my mother that my Furby was in fact creepy. I had a Furby and it got so annoying I removed the batteries. But it turns out, I learned years later, it actually had another smaller battery in it that kept it powered so you wouldn't lose what you'd taught it in between changing batteries. So randomly it would still make noises and start talking even with the batteries removed. I got so spooked I threw it away. I kind of wish I'd kept it, knowing it had a smaller battery and it would have made it a lot less scary lol. 3 nights ago my dog woke me up at around 3 a.m. She wasn't barking but full growling and huffing at my window, full on pointing, which she only does hunting. Freaked me out enough that I checked cameras and did a full property walk around. Nothing, but it freaked me out a bit. The next night, she did the exact same thing at the exact same time. This time I immediately peeked out the window before doing a full walk around. Again nothing. I don't know if she did it last night. I was pretty tipsy when I went into bed and would have slept through it anyway. If she does it again tonight, I'm installing fucking spike strips underneath my window. This is legit my plan at some point. Not necessarily a retirement plan, though. I watched Harold and Maude when I was 17 for a film class, and the old lady takes a cyanide capsule at 80 years old. I thought, that's actually a great idea. So that's been the plan ever since then. I still put away a savings for retirement and invest in my health heavily, but as soon as my quality of life diminishes enough or the savings dries up, I'll meet my end on my own terms. 100%. I had a friend who used to say it's not that I think I dislike heroin, quite the opposite. I'm afraid I like it more than anything else I've experienced. And I'm worried it'll taint all other experiences if I try it. I figure if I start doing it at the end it'll be great. Give me a week of stoned out of my mind retirement and then a hero dose at the end. I work in Manhattan, so I figure I'll probably die pretty quickly. My overall survival plan is if I can't get coffee, I'm giving up. My neighborhood lost power for nearly a week because of Sandy, but I have a gas stove, so I was able to boil water and do a pour-over type coffee. And I had shelf-stable milk in my emergency kit. If it goes beyond that kind of prep, I'm probably not surviving.